Hey guys, let's get more news about Steelers, but first don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Tomlin's comments on WRs could hint at Steelers waiting to draft one. On April 22, Pittsburgh Steelers GM Omar Khan and head coach Mike Tomlin held a press conference to discuss the team's approach to this year's NFL draft. As expected, the pair was pretty tight-lipped about their plans, and they did their best not to give away much useful information on where they are at 3 days before the draft. However, the way that Tomlin answered a couple of questions could give hints about how the team will approach one position. The Steelers need to add at the wide receiver position before the draft ends. Still, Tomlin talking about the team's comfort at the position and referencing a recent sleeper at the position who had a monster rookie year as a reason for that comfort could indicate the team is looking at options later in the draft to address the position. First part of that, I'm comfortable with the trajectory of that room, as we've mentioned, the guys come in ready-made. There's a lot of talent available to us and a lot of those guys participate. If you look at the kid from the Rams, was really significant this year and I think maybe it was a 5th-round pick. That's what's going on at that position. So, it makes us all comfortable, not just us, but us as a collective, the National Football League. And certainly, we're really comfortable with the trajectory of George Pickens in terms of what he's going to be able to provide us as a player, not only in terms of playmaking, but what his experience within the room and within this organization provides us. Tomlin's comments on the Steelers' comfort with their situation and him referring to Puka Nacua could indicate the team isn't going to be in a rush to land a receiver in this year's draft. There is plenty of talent available at the wide receiver position in this year's draft class. The top 3 receivers in the class would all have a case to be the top prospect at the position in most other years. Then there is a huge tier of players who could be taken in the 1st or 2nd round. That tier includes the fastest player in NFL Combine history, a 2-time national champion whose ceiling was compared to Antonio Brown, a player who scored 17 touchdowns last season, and one who almost reached 1,400 yards last season. Even after that tier, there are still some interesting options for teams to look at in round 3 or later. That next group includes Jerry Rice's son, Brendan Rice, and Malchi Corley, who had 101 catches for 1,295 yards in his junior season. It also includes Jacob Cowing and his more than 4,000 career yards in college. Tomlin was asked about that depth in this year's draft and the growing depth at the position in general and had this to say, "I think it's the nature and the development of the game. I think everybody plays with 3 receivers and 5 defensive backs at this stage of the game now. I also think it's, the development of 7-on-7 football at the lower levels in high school, where it's becoming more of a year-round endeavor. And so, the people that are involved in 7-on-7 have an opportunity to have a higher level of skill relative to their positions than people that don't. And I think it's played out not only in this draft, but those preceding this draft in recent years. That depth could lead to the Steelers waiting to select a receiver, despite their situation at the position being far from ideal right now. The Steelers really feel like a work in progress at the wide receiver position right now. There are no issues with their WR1 as George Pickens is coming off of a dominant year where he posted 1,140 yards. The problems come once you get past Pickens. The team doesn't have another receiver on the roster who reached 250 yards last season. It's definitely an issue for the Steelers, but it might not be one they see as a priority. Tomlin recognizes the depth at the position in this year's draft and the team's new offense might not use a ton of their WR2. Offensive coordinator Arthur Smith has relied heavily on the run in the past, regularly going over 400 rushing attempts per season. He also likes to throw the ball to tight ends, which could give Pat Freiermuth a bigger role in the offense. The team still definitely needs another option at receiver to draw some attention away from Pickens, but that might be something they feel comfortable waiting until later in the draft to get. Next boxing match set for former Steelers star Le'Veon Bell. It has been more than 3 years since former Pittsburgh Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell suited up for a game in the NFL, but his career as a professional athlete is far from over. Over the past 2 years, Bell has turned to boxing as the next step in his career and has been a part of some big events in that time. Now he will get the chance to compete in another big event. On April 20th, Misfits Boxing announced MFN DAZN X Series 15, which will feature Bell in the co-main event in a boxing match against influencer Tristan Ham. The match will serve as the first quarterfinal for the organization's cruiserweight title tournament. The card will be headlined by a fight between Elle Brooke and former UFC fighter Paige VanZant. Bell hasn't had a very long boxing career, but he has managed to get into the ring with some very notable opponents in a short stretch. His crossover into combat sports began with a matchup against another former NFL running back who regularly found himself earning All-Pro nods at the peak of his career. On September of 2022, he took on Adrian Peterson in an exhibition match and scored a win by 5th-round TKO. Bell followed that up by making his professional boxing debut just a month later as part of a huge event and took on an opponent with much more combat sports experience. Bell took on former UFC middleweight Uriah Hall as part of the undercard for Jake Paul's fight against Anderson Silva. The fight against Hall wasn't quite as successful. Bell ended up losing to Hall by unanimous decision. In April 2023, Bell returned to the boxing ring for a fight against YouTuber JMX. He picked the first win of his professional career in the fight, taking a unanimous decision. That fight took place under the Misfits Boxing banner, and now he is set to once again compete for the organization. The Steelers selected Bell in the middle of the second round back in 2013, and they couldn't have asked for a much better result to that decision. It didn't take Bell long to become a star in the NFL. In his second season with the Steelers, he racked up 1,361 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, while also adding 83 catches for 854 yards and another 3 TDs. He earned spots on All-Pro First Team and in the Pro Bowl and finished 4th in the Offensive Player of the Year voting that year. His next season was shortened by a suspension and a torn MCL, but he bounced back in a big way during year 4. In 2016, Bell had 1,268 yards on the ground and 75 catches for 616 receiving yards. His performance earned him a spot on the All-Pro Second Team and a 6th-place finish in the Offensive Player of the Year voting. ESPN cites Steelers' trade for Devin Bush as textbook flawed draft logic. The Pittsburgh Steelers clearly erred in 2019 when they traded up 10 spots in the first round of the NFL Draft for Devin Bush. The 6th-year linebacker is likely now a career backup at this point. But it's not the result that Seth Walder of ESPN criticizes in a recent article. Rather, he attacks the process by which the Steelers came to making the trade in the first place. Walder explores a number of what he considers logical fallacies that teams have employed over the years to explain decisions to trade up. He cites comments that former Steelers general manager Kevin Colbert made as an example of the "we had extra picks" fallacy. The Steelers did, in fact, have extra draft picks that year after trading Wr. Antonio Brown. They gained an extra 3rd-round pick as well as a pick in the 5th. On top of that, they anticipated getting another 3rd-round compensatory pick in 2020 for losing Le'Veon Bell. And that's why, Colbert stated very clearly, they made that trade to move up from 20 to 10 for Bush. "We said under no circumstances we would go into tomorrow, day 2, with less than 2 picks," Walder quotes Colbert as saying. "Without that trade, we would not have made this trade today. I feel comfortable in saying that because we wouldn't have had enough picks to do it." The Steelers sent the Denver Broncos their 20th overall pick along with their 2nd-round pick in 2019 and a 3rd-round pick in 2020 to move up to 10. Denver used the 20th pick to draft T. Noah Fant. They also netted QB Drew Lock and C. Lloyd Cushenberry III. Walder argues that extra draft picks are no less valuable than a team's native draft picks. You're not playing with house money just because you have more than you normally do. The reality is that you lost resources in exchange for those additional picks, in this case an elite wide receiver. The Steelers thought pulling off that trade would land them an elite linebacker, of course. And you, fan, what do you think of the situation of Devin Bush? Leave your opinion in the comments.